Regrettably, your name does not appear on the guest list. The word struck me with the force of a sudden blow. I stood there, clutching my purse, my breath trapped in my throat. The receptionist, a young woman with impeccably straightened blonde hair and a demeanor of strained courtesy, regarded me with an expression that bordered on pity. I despised that expression. "That has to be an error," I remarked, managing a slight, measured smile. My voice stayed steady, yet within, a turmoil churned.
"The bride happens to be my sister."
The woman paused, her fingers lingering above the list. She looked at me briefly before returning her gaze to the names, scanning them once more. Yet, I could already sense that initial flicker of doubt, that change in her demeanor. She wasn't going to discover my name among those listed. My stomach sank. "Could you please take another look?" I inquired, my grip on the gift bag growing firmer. She nodded swiftly, turning the pages as though she might have missed me during our initial encounter. The seconds dragged on endlessly, the gentle clinking of glasses and the soothing strains of classical music wafted in from the ballroom behind me. Suddenly, the receptionist's demeanor shifted. I recognized that expression. It was the sort of kindness offered just before sharing unwelcome tidings. She softened her tone, as if seeking forgiveness. "I apologize, Miss Carter, but I don't see your name listed here." I took a deep breath, finding my balance. "That simply doesn't add up," I remarked. "Sophia happens to be my sister. I ought to be included on that list." The woman surveyed her surroundings, her eyes darting as if to ensure no one was eavesdropping. Then, in a whisper so soft, it barely reached my ears, she stated, "It wasn't an error. Your mother specifically asked for your name to be taken off the list." In that instant, the only sound that reached me was the pounding of my own blood in my ears. I gazed at her, certain that I had misunderstood. "Excuse me, could you please clarify that?" She averted her gaze, feeling uneasy. "Your mother informed the event staff that you were not to be allowed entry under any circumstances." She continued in a low voice, as if that would somehow lessen the impact of her words. I truly apologize. This situation might feel a bit uncomfortable." Uncomfortable? Was that really the word she selected? My own mother had intentionally removed me from my sister's wedding, and all this girl could label it was awkward? A gradual, frigid numbness enveloped me, taking the place of the sharp sting of betrayal. "I understand," I replied, forcing down a lump in my throat. However, I failed to notice. Not quite. Indeed, my mother had always shown a preference for Sophia, that was well known. But to exclude me entirely? To disregard my presence on such a significant day in our family's journey? This was, without a doubt, a new pinnacle of cruelty for her. I paused, feeling the thrum of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I could pivot, insist on clarity, stride directly into the ballroom, and create a commotion. But what would that achieve? Could my mother unexpectedly pretend to be unaware? Would Sophia gaze at me, perplexed, coming to the realization too late of what had transpired? Or perhaps, would she be aware already? I pushed the thought aside. I had no intention of embarrassing myself in front of unfamiliar faces, especially in a setting where I clearly didn't belong. If my presence isn't desired, I wouldn't linger. As I gazed at the meticulously wrapped present cradled in my hands, a sense of anticipation washed over me. It was a blanket I crafted myself, pure white, adorned with intricate blue flowers. 2 months had passed as I completed it, the hues of our father's wedding gift to my mother from long ago, a token of affection, of kinship, from a family that had severed ties with me as if I were insignificant. With deliberate steps, I approached the check-in counter, where the concierge observed me with a hint of barely concealed intrigue. "Kindly ensure this reaches the bride," I remarked, placing the bag down with care. The card tucked under the ribbon was straightforward, meant for Sophia.
"Wishing you happiness. Nothing more, nothing less."
I shifted the strap of my purse and faced the majestic glass doors that opened to the outside world. The instant my heels echoed on the marble floor, I sensed it. The gaze of onlookers, their whispers swirling around me, the heavy cloak of humiliation tightening its grip on my chest. Yet, I compelled myself to continue, to maintain my posture with unwavering resolve.
"Angst outside, the night struck me, crisp and beating against my skin. The street buzzed with the gentle murmur of Chicago traffic."
Vehicles zipped by, their headlights casting a glow on the sidewalks. Joyful laughter floated from a nearby rooftop bar, where patrons raised their glasses in a toast. A gathering I was never intended to attend. I inhaled deeply. My hands quivered just a bit as I fished my phone out of my purse. I shouldn't have been taken aback. This wasn't the first instance my mother had rendered me unseen. Throughout my childhood, I had consistently been the one left in the shadows. Sophia was the shining star, the one who could do no wrong, while I was seen as the burden. The overly serious one. The one who squandered her life in a career that lacked allure. I set aside my aspirations to look after our father during his illness. I used my savings to support Sophia through law school. After his passing, I believed, perhaps foolishly, that my mother and I could finally connect on some level. Yet, affection had never flowed freely within our walls. It was always a bargain. And I had never measured up. I exhaled sharply, my grip on the phone tightening. My fingers lingered over Sophia's number. Was she aware? Did she understand that I had been excluded from her wedding? That our mother had deemed me unworthy of attending? I paused, uncertainty flooding my mind. Before I could hesitate, I pressed the screen and dialed her number.
The phone rang once, twice, 3 times.
Then, it switched to voicemail. No response at all. I gazed at the screen for what felt like an eternity before tossing the phone back into my purse. I should have seen that coming. Perhaps Sophia was preoccupied. Perhaps she was unaware of the events that unfolded. Or perhaps she had been aware from the very beginning. The idea churned in my gut. I averted my gaze from the hotel, moving to the curb to signal for a cab. I refused to let tears fall. Not in this moment. Not at this time. Yet, one thing stood out unmistakably. If they thought they could erase me from their lives, they would soon find themselves regretting that decision. This was not the conclusion of my narrative. It was merely the prologue. The cab ride home was a haze. City lights danced by the window, while neon signs painted vibrant streaks across the glass. Yet, I hardly caught a glimpse of them. My fingers drummed anxiously on my purse, while my thoughts raced through countless scenarios. The receptionist's words echoed in my mind. Your mother specifically asked for your name to be taken off.
I let out a slow breath, trembling as I leaned my forehead against the chilly glass.
My mother had wiped me from existence. Not merely from the wedding, but from the entire concept of family itself. And the most painful realization? I should have anticipated it. My mother, Victoria Carter, had always been clear that I was a burden. Sophia had always been the embodiment of perfection.
The golden child.
The one who seemed incapable of making a mistake. The individual who adhered to the meticulously crafted trajectory. Preparatory school. Prestigious university law qualification. A fiancé boasting a remarkable surname. And then there's me, the afterthought. The girl who squandered her potential on a lackluster nursing career rather than pursuing something truly distinguished. The individual who sacrificed her youth, tending to a fading father rather than pursuing her dreams. The one who always felt inadequate. Yet, what tormented me the most wasn't the bias, but the deception. Because now I was starting to understand. I had never merely been overlooked, I had been deliberately excluded. I took out my phone, scrolling through years of messages, old texts that suddenly resonated in a new light. Hey, I sent you a birthday gift, let me know if you received it. I've been thinking about you today, let's find a time to catch up soon. I saw your message at 9:43 p.m. but didn't hear back. I hope the bar exam went well, I'm really proud of you. Left undelivered. I had spent years convincing myself that Sophia was merely preoccupied. That law school had taken over her existence. The task felt insurmountable. Yet, what if those messages had never reached her? What if my mother had been carefully sifting through everything, ensuring I remained just a faint echo in Sophia's existence?
A mere spectre of a sister.
I pushed my phone into my purse, forcing down the rising nausea. It was time to stop questioning and begin seeking answers. I knew precisely where to begin. As soon as I entered my apartment, I headed directly to my bookshelf. Nestled among dusty medical textbooks and partially read novels was a small wooden box. I carefully took it down, my hands unwavering, even though a fire ignited within me. Within, meticulously arranged, lay each receipt, every bank statement, and every check I had penned for Sophia throughout the years. Her tuition. Her rent during her challenging times in law school. Her textbooks. I had poured my savings, my security, my future into ensuring she had every opportunity. And in return, I had been erased from reality. I took a deep breath, striving to keep my anger in check. I refused to expend energy on feelings that wouldn't benefit me. This was more than betrayal, it was outright theft. I set the box down on my desk and powered up my laptop. If my mother had gone to such extremes to erase my existence, I was determined to ensure she would come to regret it. This wasn't about seeking revenge out of spite. I sought justice.
I kreeft trut.
I longed for my mother to comprehend. I was never the type to fade away without a trace. Thus, I began my search.
Financial records.
I meticulously examined bank statements, identifying each dollar that had been sent to Sophia. I sifted through emails and old correspondences between my mother and me from the time when she still feigned my inclusion in the family. Legal documents. A file I had set aside following my father's passing. The one that outlined the details of his life insurance payout. And that was the moment I discovered it. A deposit.
A substantial von.
It was intended for me, a promise from my father's policy. Yet, it never found its way into my account.
My Brit kaukte sie David vorher.
The funds had been rerouted. Transferred to a different name.
Victoria Carter.
A knot formed in my stomach. She had taken what was rightfully mine. She had robbed me. It wasn't merely about money. She had robbed me of my choices, my opportunities, my independence. She had seized the final gift my father had bestowed upon me. And utilized it. For what purpose?
To finance Sophia's ideal Existenz?
To uphold the flawless facade of a perfect Carter family?
My hands clenched into fists.
I had endured years of guilt. I thought I had embraced this existence. I was convinced I had selflessly given myself for Sophia. Yet now, it dawns on me that I was never truly offered a choice at all. I spent the night wide awake, consumed by my search. I reached out to my bank. I accessed the credit reports. I reached out to a former accountant whom my father had relied on. Gradually, the complete story started to unfold. The life insurance payout intended for me was diverted. The college fund I had built for Sophia was depleted without my awareness. The birthday gifts, the letters, the messages I sent to Sophia were intercepted. Never delivered. Victoria Carter dedicated years to making sure I remained merely a footnote in our family's narrative. A living ATM devoid of a voice. Absent. Unanchored. And now she had executed the ultimate decision. She ensured that I was completely excluded from the wedding. The one day that was supposed to celebrate family.
A day of togetherness.
She had wiped me from her story. Yet, unbeknownst to her, I had uncovered the evidence that could shatter the flawless tale she had crafted. I fixed my gaze on the glow of my laptop screen. The proof loomed before me, heavy and undeniable. I possessed all the tools necessary to unveil her true self. To ensure that those she had deceived, Sophia, the wedding attendees, the society whose validation she desperately sought, would finally see her for who she truly was. I could dismantle her whole existence with just one email. But I wouldn't act hastily. No. Years were devoted to the art of her deception. I would meticulously peel back the layers. And when the time was perfect, when she was caught off guard, I would ensure Victoria Carter experienced the true essence of being obliterated.
To be nothing.
Because the one thing my mother always overlooked?
I don't vanish.
I resist. I gazed at my laptop screen, the glow of the financial records creating unsettling shadows on my walls. All the information was laid out before me. Each wire transfer. Each redirected deposit. Every single cent of my father's life insurance money, intended for me, taken by my own mother. Victoria Carter had dedicated years to meticulously crafting my disappearance, and now she reveled in what she believed was her ultimate victory. She was convinced she had succeeded. She was certain I had vanished for good. Yet she was mistaken. I had always recognized my mother's chill, but there was an especially harsh edge to the way she presented herself in public. She donned perfection as if it were a meticulously crafted garment. Meticulously crafted for appreciation. I knew exactly where she would be at that moment. The morning following the wedding, she would be enjoying brunch at the Hanover Club. Her cherished enclave of elite whispers. For women such as Victoria, standing in society was paramount. It was the essence of their existence. The currency they employed. The weapon they brandished. Against anyone who dared to challenge their meticulously crafted facade. And me? I had been the imperfection she devoted years to erasing. I could already envision her there.
Immaculate.
In a soft cream cashmere ensemble, she savored imported tea, her pearls glinting in the morning light, encircled by her devoted admirers. Reflecting on Sophia's flawless wedding. Reflecting on her relief that everything unfolded seamlessly. Reflecting on the unfortunate decision I made to stay away. I gritted my teeth, a dull ache radiating through my jaw. Victoria had always seemed beyond reach. She had crafted her empire from deceit, ill-gotten gains, and cunning schemes. Yet, every seat of power bore its imperfections. I was on the verge of uncovering hers. By midday, I had assembled all the essentials. The financial statements, the bank records, even the old emails she had carelessly sent me in the past. Those moments where she revealed just enough for me to connect the dots now. I wasn't about to destroy her in a moment of anger. That approach didn't resonate with me. My plan was to create a sense of security for her initially. After that, I intended to destabilize her world. I reached for my phone and, after months of silence, dialed my mother. She picked up on the third ring, her voice calm and measured, as if she had practiced this exchange in her mind beforehand. "Elena, your message caught me by surprise." Naturally, she didn't anticipate this. She believed she had severed all ties for good. "I thought it was time for us to have a conversation," I stated, maintaining a steady tone. "I was wishing for the opportunity to meet." A moment of silence followed. Then the sound of her sipping her tea. "Meet? Whatever for?"
"Tu clear the air."
I allowed the words to linger between us, suspended with just enough ambiguity for her to grasp onto. Victoria thrived on control, yet she also relished victory. Convinced she had already triumphed, she predictably fell for the trap. "Fine," she declared, her voice cutting through the air like a blade.
"Let's get together."
I was the first to arrive. The Hanover Club looked just as I recalled. A gallery of vintage wealth and hushed intrigues, hidden beneath pristine white linens and extravagant bubbly. As Victoria entered, she radiated brilliance. Her stance exuded triumph in every way. "Elena," she said, gliding into the seat opposite me with an air of effortless elegance. There was no embrace, not even a pretense of one. "You appear, well," she went on, yet the self-satisfied glimmer in her eyes suggested she anticipated a different outcome. She expected to see me shattered. Instead, I offered a smile. "So do you," I deceived. I allowed her to revel in it for a moment, to savor the false sense of victory, to think that I was there to seek her forgiveness, to establish harmony on her terms. I permitted her to hold on to that belief for precisely 5 minutes. And then I broke it apart. "You know," I said, placing my phone on the table, "I never truly thought you would exclude me entirely." Victoria arched an eyebrow, taking a sip of her tea. "You've excluded yourself, my dear. You've always been so challenging." That was her reasoning. That was her way of making sense of it all. Taking from me, deceiving me, turning me into a stranger within my own family. She referred to it as discipline. She labeled it as a lesson learned. Yet, I had uncovered the reality at last. I reached into my purse and retrieved a solitary sheet of paper. I laid it across the table. Her expression remained unchanged initially, but that shifted when her gaze fell upon it, when she finally recognized what it was. A copy of the redirected life insurance payout, intended for me. The color drained from her face. I tilted my head, observing how she stiffened, how her fingers curled slightly around her cup as if she could squeeze her composure back into place. "The money was meant for me." My tone was soft yet resolute. "Dad intended for me to have it." She remained silent at first. Yet, I noticed the instant her pride wavered. "I did what was best for the family," she eventually admitted. Yet, the assurance in her voice began to wane.
"No, y Amanda."
Leaning in just a bit. "You chose what was right for you." In that moment, I witnessed something unusual. Fear.
Not fear of me.
Fear of losing control. Because she understood. She understood the extent of my influence over her fate. "I'm not here to debate, Mother," I stated, observing her intently. "I'm here to present you with an option." She let out a derisive laugh, the facade reasserting itself.
A choice?
Indeed, I replied with calm assurance. You can either mend what you've shattered, or I will take matters into my own hands. I allowed that to linger. I gave her the space to absorb its significance. I wasn't playing games, I had evidence to back it up. I possessed all the tools necessary to guarantee that each individual in her immaculate social circle understood precisely what type of woman she truly was. She might attempt to resist me. She might endeavor to weave another falsehood. Yet, within her heart, she understood that this time, victory was not hers to claim. Her realm rested on fragile foundations, and I was poised to bring it all crashing down. Her fingers quivered ever so slightly as she extended her hand toward the tea. She concealed it expertly, yet I noticed. I noticed the instant Victoria Carter understood she had lost her grip. Very well, she finally uttered, her tone sharp and strained. What do you desire? I smiled. Finally, we were making progress. Victoria Carter had dedicated her life to mastering the art of storytelling, weaving fabrications so intricately that others accepted them without question. She held the conviction that power was everlasting, that reputation was beyond reproach. Did she think the truth was merely a narrative she could alter? She was mistaken. Today, she would discover just how mistaken she truly was. She fixed her gaze on me from across the table, her impeccably manicured fingers clutching the edge of the document I had just presented. The redirected life insurance payout, the funds my father intended for me that had inexplicably found their way into her account. Victoria's expression remained inscrutable. Yet, I recognized her signs. The subtle tightness in her jaw. The deliberate breath she took in an attempt to calm herself. She was weighing her options, contemplating whether to refuse. To steer the situation, I allowed the silence to linger, letting her become engulfed by it. Then she placed the paper down, folded her hands neatly over it, and offered a smile. A calculated, detached response.
You're overreacting, Elena.
A soft chuckle rose from deep within me. I was taken aback by her swift capitulation, but to gaslight me despite the irrefutable evidence? That was audacious.
Dramatic, I mused, tilting my head.
Mom, you took money that rightfully belonged to me. How exactly is that DRA? She let out a sigh, as if addressing a difficult child. I did what needed to be done, she replied with calm assurance.
Your Vater left a Tangelsituation behind.
There were costs, responsibilities. I acted in the family's best interest. No, you acted in your own best interest. She stiffened, her refined facade faltering just a touch. And let's face it, I pressed on, leaning in a bit closer. You never really believed I would uncover the truth, did you? Her mouth opened, yet silence lingered. Because I was correct. She had exuded such certainty in my absence, in my quietude. She had ensured that I remained nothing more than a mere shadow within this family. Someone who would accept without hesitation, who would remain passive. She had never envisioned a version of me that would stand up for myself. So she said, clearing her throat and mustering a smile. What do you truly desire? A phrase often heard, yet this time it was laced with uncertainty. It was spoken from a place of fear. I savored the moment before responding, observing her discomfort intently, allowing her to experience the sensation of being at another's mercy. I stated plainly, I want my money. Every single cent. She let out a derisive laugh. There's no way you can. I retrieved another sheet of paper and pushed it toward her across the table. A formal demand letter from an attorney I had reached out to the previous evening. It meticulously outlined what had been taken, the supporting documentation, and the potential legal consequences if the funds were not returned. Her gaze moved swiftly across the letter. Her expression was a mask, yet I noticed the faint quiver of her fingers as she placed it down. You'd really do this? She asked, her voice now barely above a whisper. You left me no choice.
A Moment of Stillness.
A profound silence enveloped us as I witnessed the truth finally take root within her. This was not merely a warning, it was a vow. She might put up a struggle. She could attempt to postpone what is bound to happen. Yet ultimately, defeat would be hers. For someone like Victoria Carter, the thought of losing was her greatest fear. That day, she held back her agreement, choosing not to say yes right away. Yet, I could see the battle raging within her gaze. This situation transcended mere finances. Should this become public, should I take legal action, the repercussions would extend far beyond her wallet. It would tarnish her reputation. For someone like my mother, that held more value than any amount of money. The following day, I received a text from Sophia. Sophia, something's off with Mom.
She keeps bringing you up.
What's going on? I found myself staring at the message for quite a while before I replied. Me. She has finally been caught.
A moment of silence.
Then another text. Sophia, what are you referring to? Me. Inquire with her. For Victoria Carter, the one scenario she had never anticipated was her flawless daughter uncovering the truth. That was a card I was poised to play. Just 3 days were enough for the fractures to become unfixable. It was 3 days prior to Sophia's arrival at my apartment, her eyes aflame with intensity, seeking the truth. Just 3 days before the carefully constructed walls that Victoria had erected began to crumble. Tell me she's lying, Sophia insisted, clutching the printed financial statements I had given her. Evidence that each tuition payment, every present from our mother, stemmed from my misappropriated inheritance. Please tell me she didn't really go this far. I remained silent. I didn't need to say a word. She already grasped the answer. I observed as comprehension washed over her.
Ali Fatime of Deception coming apart before our eyes.
You just vanished, Sophia murmured, her voice trembling. That you didn't care at all. You were too occupied for us. I tightened my jaw. Yes, I replied. And what do you believe now? Her hands clenched the papers tightly. I believe you. In that moment, Victoria lost her favorite daughter. Sophia took the initiative to confront her. My presence wasn't necessary, I was already aware of how it would unfold. Victoria would deny, deflect, and play the victim. But Sophia had transformed. She was no longer the girl she had been just a week prior. The instant she met our mother's gaze and declared, I know what you did, it marked the end of everything. Victoria Carter's power stemmed not from genuine strength, but from the conviction of her own invincibility. Once that conviction fractured, so did her very essence. By the week's end, my funds were returned. Victoria had put up a fight. She delayed, begged, and even attempted to bribe me into silence about the truth.
Jeti stot my ground.
This was not merely a financial matter. It was about ensuring she faced the consequences. Not in dollars, but in the one thing she cherished above all else, her legacy.
For now, Sophia understood.
And soon, everyone else would too. I had no intention of destroying her. She had already accomplished that on her own. I wasn't foolish enough to believe that Victoria would ever transform. Women like her remained constant. They merely adjusted. They discovered fresh methods to influence, new individuals to mislead. Yet, in this moment, she found herself utterly alone. As I observed Sophia distancing herself, I noticed the fear in my mother's gaze as the reality of her loss sank in. A feeling washed over me that had been absent for years. Relief. She had wiped me from existence. She had taken from me. She had altered the narrative to render me insignificant. Ultimately, she was the one who faded away. As for me, I finally had the chance to begin anew. On my own terms. In her absence, Victoria Carter had devoted her existence to crafting a grand facade. She manipulated those around her, reshaped stories, and fashioned the ideal image of a mother, a widow, a woman of sophistication. Yet, the nature of illusions is such that they thrive in the shadows of scrutiny. And now? All eyes were fixed upon them. The fractures in my mother's reality didn't merely expand, they splintered into countless pieces. It began with subtle hints.
A handful of murmurs.
Fleeting looks exchanged. Unanswered invitations lingered in the air. Yet, society showed no mercy for frailty. My mother, who once stood as a beacon of high society's ideals, had transformed into something far more troubling. A scandal unfolded. Sophia ceased answering her calls. The wedding guests were abuzz with rumors. The Hanover Club, a place where my mother had once been treated like royalty, had abruptly lost her reservation. After decades of cultivating influence, it took less than a week to strip it all away. I should have felt victorious. And yet, witnessing her unravel bit by bit wasn't as gratifying as I had envisioned. I came to a realization. She was already hollow. She devoted so much time to trying to erase my existence, to twisting Sophia's perceptions, that in the end, she was left with nothing. No family.
No influence.
There was no one left to deceive. I had believed that revenge was my desire, but what I truly sought was liberation. With my inheritance reclaimed, the possibilities were endless. I had the option to escape the city, to vanish from my family's narrative as my mother had always wished. Yet, I chose a different path. I reconstructed my life in the manner it was meant to be. I settled into a new apartment, one that eased my financial concerns. I departed from my exhausting hospital job and embraced a role at a private clinic, where my contributions were genuinely appreciated. I explored new places. I
experienced.
At last, I was embracing decisions that were solely mine. Not from a sense of duty. Not from a place of giving up something. Simply because I had the ability to do so. My sister's healing process was prolonged. I hold no resentment towards her. She had lived her whole life under our mother's influence, accepting her interpretation of reality. It required patience to shed the falsehoods. Gradually, Sophia started to perceive my mother in her true light. It was a gradual realization, evident in the way she paused before responding to her calls, the way she ceased to offer her defense. One evening, Sophia appeared at my apartment. She lingered in the doorway, her hands buried in the pockets of her designer coat. "I can't believe I didn't notice it earlier," she confessed, her voice trembling. I welcomed her inside, brewed some coffee, and for the first time in ages, we conversed like sisters. Not as rivals, not as the daughters of Victoria Carter, but simply as Elena and Sophia.
I kaukt afinal glimpse of my Mutter.
It was an unexpected moment. As I strolled through the city on a brisk fall morning, the air filled with the aroma of coffee and charred leaves, my gaze fell upon her. She sat outside a café, solitary. The woman who had once commanded the attention of every gathering now stood as just another overlooked figure. She glanced up, our eyes locking for a fleeting moment, and I found myself pondering what words might escape her lips. Would she express regret, or perhaps acknowledge her downfall? Yet she refrained. She merely raised her cup, offered me a faint, empty smile, and turned her gaze elsewhere. For ultimately, Victoria Carter was never one to be defeated. Not in her thoughts. She merely adapted, and I had already invested too much of my life attempting to make her notice me. So I turned and walked away for good. It took me a considerable amount of time to release the burden of her presence, to silence the internal dialogue that echoed her doubts about my worth. Yet the journey of rediscovering oneself isn't a sudden transformation, it unfolds gradually, in fleeting instances. It occurs when you find humor in something trivial and understand that your joy isn't dependent on anyone else's validation. It occurs when you plan a getaway solely for your own enjoyment, disregarding any naysayers. It occurs when you gaze into the mirror and at long last, truly acknowledge the individual reflecting back at you. I didn't triumph by tearing down my mother. I succeeded by creating something greater. Something authentic.
Something that belongs to me. I never glance back.
For the finest form of revenge is to lead a life they cannot influence. Deceit manifests in various ways. At times, it is bold and unmistakable. At other moments, it lurks silently, intricately embedded within the tiniest fissures of our connections. Yet the true inquiry lies not in the betrayal itself, but in your subsequent actions. Imagine this: if you found out that someone had wiped you from their existence, taken from you, and altered your narrative without your approval, would you choose to retaliate or would you turn away and create something greater? Share your thoughts in the comments. I am eager to listen to your tale.